Hey everybody, John Huber here from the Maryland Education Network. I want to talk to you a little bit about this school shooting case in Michigan. Um, tragic situation out there. If you're not sure what went on, you Google around and find out. It's a huge story. Kid goes in and basically shoots up the school. Killed 5 people now. A dozen or so wounded. Just a god awful situation. But what the part that's going to start coming out now, and this is going to be the next phase of this, is going to be what responsibility does everybody else bear in this? And I can tell you, I'm speaking from personal experience. Um, this is a very difficult situation on all, and I'll tell you why. Because there were apparently some indicators, as there always are, ahead of time that this child was ready to do this. Um, First of all, the day before the incident, apparently a teacher saw this kid on his phone looking up ammunition. She contacted the parents or something of that nature. And again, don't take my word for everything that happened here. I'm just kind of summarizing what I've read in other places. But then the next day, which was the day of the shooting, apparently a teacher found reason to really have concern about this child. And he or she, they don't say, takes the child to the counselor's office. They get to the counselor's office, and apparently the parents were brought in, the child's parents. And they had a conference. Don't really know what happened at that conference. According to what I've read, the teacher or the school wanted to send him home, but the parents didn't want to take him home. The child did not want to go home, so they sent him back to class. 2 hours later, all hell breaks loose, and this kid's back there shooting people up. So before we start pointing fingers and throwing blame around, just put yourself in that counselor's shoes. Oh my God, I can't imagine what that must be like. When you know you have this child in your office, you're concerned, you're telling the parents you need to take him home, you need to do this, and then they say no and they don't go. So then the question becomes, okay, if they knew this much and had this much concern, what should they have done? That then comes down to a matter of two things. It comes down to a matter of what their policies are, and it comes down to a matter of what the laws are in Michigan. I don't know. But what I can tell you is I can give you my experience here in Maryland. In general, unless the child is being suspended for some type of disciplinary action, whatever he or she may have done, then you can't just exclude a child from school pending some type of mental health. They can't do it. And I've been in that case before where I've had some real concerns about some students. And unless there's some immediate thing that the child has done, you can say, well, he's being suspended. Okay? Then you can have suspended, and then they can require him to, and then it gets a little more complicated. But by the superintendent's own words, I just watched a little video of his on there, he said no discipline was warranted. Now, that could just be a catchphrase on their part to try and avoid lawsuits. That could be where they are. They could be saying, you know what, no discipline was warranted. And assuming that no discipline was warranted, we were therefore under no obligation, or we had no right to exclude him from school because no discipline was warranted. The next question then becomes, why was no discipline warranted? Was what he had done up to that point, was that sufficient enough to warrant discipline? He was found with drawing some inappropriate pictures with some threats. Now, was it a threat on specific? I don't know what their discipline policy looks like. So if their discipline policy has some kind of language in there that says that a suspendable offense may include threats, etc., then there might be a problem for the school system because they might say, well, you know what, discipline was warranted and you chose not to do it. There's another issue too that I'm waiting to hear about. They say there were no discipline on records on file for this child, et cetera, et cetera. And the other thing I'm waiting to find out is if this were a special education student. I don't know. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But what you can surely see is that if he was, that's a whole nother realm of problems that develop, especially if he were some type of, like if he were coded as emotionally disturbed or something of that nature. And again, I'm not saying he was. I'm just saying that is a possibility for them to look into. So anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out as far as responsibility for the schools. They've already determined that his parents are responsible because they've tracked him down. They were trying to flee apparently. Now they claim they weren't fleeing, but they found him somewhere else and they locked him up. And the parents are being charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. I don't know what the law says about that, but I can tell you this, that when it comes to school, and I have been in those conversations, in those counseling offices, I don't say hundreds, but dozens and dozens of times where you're presenting the student, you're presenting the parents with the information, they're just kind of brushing it off. Oh, he was just, he watches games online, he doesn't really mean anything by it, that kind of stuff. I don't know what their policies are. I can tell you in Maryland we do what's called threat assessments and all that. And those threat assessments are done by counselors. God help counselors who have to do these things, because as a counselor, it's mostly their responsibility to look at these threats and try and determine if it is a legitimate threat. There are certain telltale questions that should be asked. And this is what the nuts and bolts of these investigations are going to come down to. It's going to come down to, well, what transpired in that conversation between the parents, the counselor, and the student. The first question is, was there an administrator there? And if there was, well, then they're going to question, well, why wasn't any action taken? Did he do anything to violate the student discipline policy, et cetera, et cetera? If there was no administrator at the meeting, then the first question is, why not? Why wasn't there an administrator there? But if there was, then the next question is, well, did you ask the question? There's certain questions. Now I'm talking from my Maryland background. Does the child have access to a weapon? If so, is the weapon available, readily available? Is it secured? Is it accounted for? If they asked those questions, okay, and the people lied about it and said, oh, yeah, no, he doesn't have access. If they said that, then a lot of that responsibility then comes off the school. Say, hey, they just lied about it. But if they ask the questions about that, and they just, or the worst case scenario for this school right now is if they didn't ask those questions. If they just pulled him in and said, hey, we see these little drawings here, and he just went, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. And they went, oh, okay. I don't think that's happening. I don't think the school brushed it off. But I also found out by digging around a little bit that apparently there were a whole bunch of people, students, who didn't go to school that day. And the attendance was very, very low. And the reason is because of rumors about this going to happen. I've been wrapped up in that too. I remember one day, I even have it on a video one time where there was just rumors running crazy in a school I was stationed in about the school's going to be shot up. And I'd say we probably had about a 20 to 30% attendance rate that day. And the parents just said, I don't want to hear it go to school. And it turned out to be all a bunch of hogwash. The last thing I'll say before I go is this. I'm assuming there's no SRO involved in this case. If there was, we haven't heard much about it. Apparently they had to wait for deputies to arrive. So all the people who say, we need to get rid of guns and we don't want, okay, then fine, that's your that's your position on it. But then what are you going to do here? And my suspicion is that when this is all over, they're going to institute some type of a SRO program. School resource officers, like a police officer stationed at the school. That's what that means. So anyway, terrible, terrible situation. The school's responsibility will all come down to what happened in that meeting with that child and the parent, and was their administrator there? Did they ask appropriate questions? Did the parents respond honestly to them? So anyway, that's where we are. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm just giving you my input. New York Times has been, has some interesting articles about it. And if you like the New York Times, if you like CNN, which I'm not a big fan of CNN for whatever reason, I'll make this political, but I just don't like them in general. But anyway, New York Times, CNN seems to have some interesting. New York Times seems to be taking the angle of what's the school's responsibility. So anyway, if you have any questions, shoot me some questions, some emails. Especially if you got anything related locally that's going on here. But anyway, I'm keeping an eye on this, and I'll let you know what I think. Thanks, and have a great day.